How to be here. This is a video about learning to enjoy life and be happy no matter where we happen to find ourselves. Hey guys, it's Anita. Welcome back if you hang out with me normally. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. These creative studio sessions are where I share ideas and insights for living a brave, meaningful, and creative life. And today we're going to talk about something that is very personal and close to my heart right now, which is how to be here. 26 months ago, I came back to the Toronto area after many years being a traveling content creator. This was a huge adjustment for me, and it's taken me 2 and a bit years to finally get to a place where I feel like I can be genuinely happy and content here. And I know that this tension between wanting to be somewhere else at the same time as embracing where we are now is something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and I still do sometimes, but I can finally say that I'm grateful to be in the Toronto area and to have the life that I have. And it's been a long process of kind of gathering my soul from all the places that it lives in the world and learning how to be here and to be happy. So I'm going to share some tips and advice from my journey of learning to be happy. The first tip is to let yourself adjust gradually. I knew that it would be a process for me to learn how to find home here. And then the crazy thing was that a part of me didn't even want to make the Toronto area my home. It's just where my family is, it's where I grew up, it's where the rest of my stuff was, and so I knew I had to come back. The thing is though, I came back a little bit begrudgingly. I'd had a crazy supernatural experience while traveling that was the reason I came back to Toronto. So I wasn't particularly happy to be back. I just knew that this was where I was supposed to be, at least for a while. So although my physical body was here, I knew that it would take time for my soul. And I wasn't about to force myself to be happy because that never works. So I knew it would be a process, and I really encourage you to just embrace the process. Even though it's going to happen slowly, it doesn't mean it's not happening. And there's also a difference between being stagnant, which is just being stubborn and being like, I'm forced to be here, so I'm just going to be unhappy here the whole time, versus being like, okay, I'm here, it's going to be difficult, and I'm just going to embrace this process and let myself change. It felt a little bit like thawing, like an ice cube. I was slowly melting, and you can't really force an ice cube to melt. I mean, the way you do that is you like put it in a fire, you put it on something really hot and you burn it. And I wasn't about to like burn myself, so I just let myself slowly thaw. So number 1, let yourself adjust gradually. Tip number 2 is to make lists of the good things. And I don't mean one list, I mean make many lists. Several months ago, I started writing blogs about the things that I'm learning to love about life in the city. I felt like I needed to do that to remind myself of how blessed life is here, and there are lots of good things about living in the city. The thing though was that I was comparing my life in the city to what it felt like when I was traveling and to the adventure and joys of traveling. Like, there are so many incredible things about living in Hawaii, like being able to pick fruit off of trees and the warmth and how nice people are and how free you can be compared to in the city. There's traffic jams and there's lines and there's like crazy people. So as you can see, coming up with good things about the places I'd been to travel and bad things about the city was becoming natural to me. And I didn't like that. I needed to change that. So I started making lists of the good things, and I made a conscious effort to remember what it feels like when I'm traveling and all the things that I was grateful for about the city when I was traveling. So for example, when I'm traveling and electricity goes out often, or I want to order something from Amazon and I don't even have a proper address to ship stuff to. Also, if my technology breaks down when I'm traveling and I'm somewhere really rugged, it's a big deal because I can't just buy a replacement battery. Like if my cable is gone, then it's gone and I can't even charge stuff. So those are the types of things that I started reminding myself of here. Like the fact that there's health food stores and I can get food anytime I want, like this is a huge blessing. And so I have been making lists and lists and lists to remind myself of the good things about life here. It seems a little bit silly to like make lists to myself, but I mean, that's why I turn them into blogs. But it is also a very important thing because it gives your soul a chance to just remember and to be. And even if no one ever sees these lists, it's like they sink into your soul and bit by bit, they help you to remember the good things about life here. For me, this was also important because I wanted to be content here. I didn't want to fight Toronto and my life here for the next couple of years because I knew that this was going to be a chapter of my life, living and working in the city and learning how to thrive here. So I wanted to embrace it. And I can't force myself to be content, but I can make myself think positive thoughts. And the more I did it, the more content I became and the more happy I became. And it was just like layer by layer, I could feel that I was becoming more happy. Making lists of good things is also really helpful when you realize that our brains are wired with a negativity bias. When we were cavemen, we were always on the lookout for danger because danger meant we had to run and we had to defend ourselves, and it was a real danger. But nowadays, we don't have that kind of danger, but we're often on the lookout for the same kind of danger, like, am I going to get sick or car accident? Anyone who's a mom can probably relate to the fact that like you're always worrying about your children. So being positive is like a muscle that you have to flex. And I was like, hey, I'm getting flabby here because I keep complaining about my life in Toronto. I need to start flexing my positivity muscles. Tip number 3 is to make your space feel like the home that you actually want. Wherever you are right now, I'm going to guess that you don't live in like your dream home. If you're a student, maybe you live in a dorm. If you're a young mom, maybe you're living in your first house and it's cramped or it hasn't been decorated yet. When I moved back, I knew I wasn't going to be living in some fancy condo in Toronto. I was going to be with my parents for a bit, and I didn't know how long this would be, but I just had to figure it out. So it became important to me to figure out how to make my space feel like home. And rather than complaining about how like I don't want to be here, I wish I just could go back and live in Portugal and Indonesia and all these incredible places, I was like, hey, there's a lesson and an assignment in this, Anita. You've got to learn how to thrive here. So I made a decision that I was going to make my room something that was livable and something inspiring. Especially when I got back into the headspace of creating content for my channels, I knew that I needed a creative space. So in my imagination, one day I would have a creative studio. Whether that's like a workshop or a filming space, I just like one day that's what I want. So I started to think about how could I have that right now? And I went on YouTube and I started looking up videos about like how to decorate your room because I have no idea. Like I did not grow up in a family where like interior design and having a homey space is a priority. So I really had to learn it from scratch. So I took notes from these YouTube videos. I went on Pinterest, took more notes of a couple items I could purchase from IKEA. And I made a trip, got a couple of items and redid my room. It wasn't even like I made a huge change. It was just that I decided I'm going to turn my room into a creative studio. I want it to feel like a creative studio. And I did it. I was amazed by the fact that I could actually do it. And I'm going to show you guys some before and after pictures here so that you can see the difference. And it wasn't like I didn't even paint the walls. It was just a couple of things I did that made a huge difference. And so now when I walk into my room, I remind myself, I'm like, this is my creative studio. I built my creative studio. It's beautiful, the colors make me happy, and the room makes me happy. So this was a really conscious effort that I made to turn my space into a place that would feel like home. Despite the part of me that was like, I don't want to be home in Toronto, I was like, no, Anita, you're going to learn how to make this life beautiful. Because if you can make life beautiful when you're somewhere else, you're going to learn how to do it now. And I have. And the extra blessing of turning my room into a creative studio is that I actually feel like I have a creative studio. And I don't know a lot of people who can say like, yeah, I have a creative studio. And yeah, it's my bedroom, but it's still my creative studio. So even just that switch in language of being like, actually, I have a space that is mine and that's creative and that's inspiring. And when I want to change things up to make it more inspiring, I do. Tip number 4 is to make things that capture this experience. One of the reasons that some of my travels stand out so vividly in my mind is because I've made videos and photos to capture it. And I love the act of creating something to capture this experience. And I knew when I came back to Toronto, like I had this long period of adjustment and getting jobs and finding my way back onto creating content for these channels. But I just knew that I wanted to capture this experience in Toronto. So I already have lots of ideas for other vlogs I want to make while I'm here, other short films ideas, just beautiful things that I want to make. When I first arrived though, I wasn't making videos and I wasn't taking photos. And I needed that time of adjustment, but I consciously like woke my creative soul back up and was like, Anita, you've got to capture this experience. So for me, that practice of getting in the hang of making videos was really important to feeling at home here, but also happy here, because making videos makes me really happy. It literally forces me to see my environment differently because I'm looking for what are the beautiful things, like what are the nuances of a space, how does it feel, how can I capture that atmosphere and convey it to someone. Maybe making videos isn't your thing. Maybe there's another way that you can capture this experience. Whatever it is, I encourage you to find something to capture the experience that you're going through right now. One of the big things that travel taught me about really embracing life, no matter where I find myself, is that every experience is going to come to an end. Even if you've bought a home and you think you're going to live in it until you're 66 or 88, like, what if you don't? What if something happens though and then you have to move? Why don't you savor this experience that you have? Which actually leads me to tip number 5, which is to savor and linger in the experiences of your daily life. I've noticed that when I'm rushing through things, it's really hard to enjoy myself. And especially with life in the city now and jobs and traffic, everyone is shuffling between things all the time. And so I've developed a practice of when I find myself really enjoying something or I find myself in somewhere beautiful, I purposely stay and I linger. I take my time in places. So for example, I'll take a later bus so that I can just sit and dream and think. On Fridays, I work in this little town outside of the Toronto area, and it has this cute little downtown area. So I always make a point to go for a walk to the lake and also just through the streets. And I admire the houses and the shops, and I just take a moment to feel what it would feel like if I was walking the streets of Barcelona on a Friday afternoon. In the end, it's a feeling, and the more that I savor and linger my day-to-day life here, I find that the more my spirits stay lifted. This involves making a conscious choice not to rush between things and actually just to stay an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes. There actually have been some Saturdays where I go to a park and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna stay here just while I eat my apple. And then I end up staying for hours and hours. There was even once where I brought a book and I was gonna go for a hike and then read my book somewhere, and I actually was on this hike and I found a little cute spot overlooking this ledge. Actually, it's not a cute spot. It was an incredible spot overlooking a ledge along a trail. And usually people just walk by, they take a photo, and then they keep going. I decided I was going to sit on the edge of this cliff and I read my book there for 2 or 3 hours, and it was the best. When was the last time you had an incredible view while you read a book? I can't even remember because that was one time that I did it. So doing things like this, where I just consciously slow down and let myself stay for as long as I want, at least 5 minutes, but sometimes I'll stay for an extra 2 hours. These are the things that slow down my soul, and they remind me that it's a blessing to be here and that there's beauty all around me. Tip number 6 is to get a fresh perspective. Read books by other people who have found a positive attitude for the situation you're living in right now or where you live. So I purposely went to the library and got books about unforgettable places in Toronto, things to do in Toronto, or beautiful parks to see in Ontario, Canada. Things like this just remind me that there's a beauty here and there's goodness. And if it's not about the location for you and it's something like your life situation, like you've got your first kid and it's really difficult, if you read books written by other moms who've found ways to be positive, you'll be so encouraged. There are times when it's really good to practice your fresh perspective by doing things like writing the lists that I mentioned earlier, but sometimes my brain can't think of anything, and it's really helpful to go to someone else who has already found the inspiration to see the situation positively. Tip number 7 is to go somewhere new in wherever you live. How many times do you walk by a cute shop and tell yourself that you don't have time to go in? How about you go in? And for me, sometimes I'll even go to different grocery stores just for the novelty of being able to see things differently. When you've been living in the same place for a long time, it's really easy to get into ruts. And I have this theory that our brains crave a novelty. We want something new, and so we don't give ourselves something new. It's almost like our brain and our soul starts eating itself because we're not giving it new fuel for consumption. So I've made a point of looking up parks in Ontario that I want to visit. When I know that the seasons are going to change, I make a point to take days off so that I can go and drone this beautiful scenery and just take time to enjoy it. I've found that when I'm stuck in the hustle and bustle of life, it's really hard to find contentment and joy. It's like our souls need time to settle in and just soak in the beauty of life. So these are my tips for how to be here. For me, the process of learning how to embrace life wherever we find ourselves is a lifelong one. And it's like we build the muscle to learn how to be happy anywhere. And when you've got it, it's like it makes me feel like I have a superpower because I can literally go anywhere and be happy. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Feel free to let me know in the comments. If you want to follow more of my creative adventures in Toronto and eventually around the world again, you can join me over on Instagram or my blog, anitawingley.com, or subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing in this journey with me. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one.